Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. During the webinar, we'll bring you expert views, opinions, industry best practices, and practical tips for the HR community. Today, we have a very special guest, Karen Weeks. Karen Weeks is the Chief People Officer of Ordergroove, where she focuses on Ordergroove's company culture, people strategy, and HR function. Karen wears many hats. She's the founder and principal coach at KDW Coaching, host of Shine at Work, speaker, published author, and an award-winning culture leader. Thank you, Karen, for your time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all ours. Karen, I want to start today with a question that's troubling companies across the globe. It's about the great resignation and what can HR leaders and managers do to avoid that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's actually an interesting twist to this, and I'll sort of talk about both if that works for you. But there's
Sure.
some places where you want to get ahead of it, right? You want to make sure that you are doing everything possible to really retain your great team. But it's also okay if some people opt out and do resign and move on to something else. And for me, I really am trying to find the right balance of let's build a great culture where people want to be, and then let's also help them understand what their paths can look like at the company. So at Ordergroove, we talk a lot about career pathing, career development, opportunities for just learning and expanding your skills. And hopefully that leads to a great career at Ordergroove for many, many years. We're very lucky. We've got people who have 4, 6, 8 years at the company. But if they're looking for an opportunity based on what they've learned and experienced and what their goals are, that doesn't fit with Ordergroove, that's okay too. And so when I think about the Great Resignation, yes, it's about making sure that you're keeping your key people and your best people, but it's actually more about understanding what's important to your team and important to the people that are on the team in building a culture and an environment where they can thrive and succeed for as long as it makes sense for them, and that you're having those ongoing conversations so you're not surprised when someone decides to leave. You're supportive of it and you knew it was just because it was the right time for them.
Right. And that's an interesting way to look at it, right? How you can help them evolve and develop their own career. But we also see on the other side where, most managers are not trained to manage people. Obviously, that kind of leads to stress. And what can HR do to help managers deal with the stress of managing people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great segue from what we were just talking about, because while retention is something HR should be focused on, it's actually not. We probably don't have the most influence. We can give the fundamentals there, but it's really the relationship with the managers that may or may not break someone in having them leave or not. So I think that's a perfect segue into how we can better support our managers. So some of it is just fundamentals. So being a manager is a different job. A lot of times managers get promoted or get hired as managers because they were amazing individual contributors, but half of those skills are not going to be the skills that they need moving forward. So how can we actually train them on how to interview and how to assess good candidates to hire onto their team? How to have those conversations about career goals and development, and creating a safe space for conversations around stress and burnout and what might be going on in people's lives. How for managers to manage their own time between what they're trying to do with their team, what they're expected as managers, with their own managers, cross-functional projects they might be a part of now. So they're now spread and having to think about a lot of different things. How to help them drive results through others. So they're not the ones doing the work anymore. They're helping others do the work and be successful, which is a totally different skill. So a lot of years, both at Ordergroove and prior to Ordergroove and on the side as a coach, I've really focused on helping managers build those skills and take that step forward and help them both with the fundamentals, but also recognize what's different. So yes, I can teach you on how to interview and onboard and retain people, but how do I actually help you rebrand yourself as a new manager? How do I help you make that transition? And I think that's HR's role, is helping coach the manager through those moments and make sure they have the fundamentals and make sure they feel supported during this transition, and how to handle things they've never handled before, and really being a partner for them during that so that they can then be the best manager for their teams, which helps make their team stronger and more successful and more engaged in all the things that we want from them.
Right. And we often talk about, creating an environment for employees to thrive, set them up for success, and engaging employees, right? But what, in your opinion, are the most important drivers of employee engagement?
Yeah, I think it's two things, maybe three things. I think one is a sense of belonging. So, do I feel respected, included? Do I see myself across the team? Do I feel like my voice is being heard and respected and considered? You don't have to do everything that I suggest, but like, do I feel welcome and like I feel like a part of this team? So, there's that sense of belonging. Then I think it's relationship with people. So, do I have a strong relationship with my manager? If I go to them with feedback, do I feel like they're listening to me? Do I feel like they're giving me feedback on my own work? So really building that relationship with the manager. And then do I have a future here? Can I see myself growing here? Do I feel like I'm able to make a difference and I'm making an impact in the work that we're doing, that I'm tying it to the strategy of the organization? Do I really feel like I'm adding value? So I think those are three different places that I tend to see in surveys that are the most important to folks. And when I either hire people, that's what they're looking for, or when I have people that are considering, is this still the right place for me, or have decided to move on, that's what I'm getting in some of those exit interviews.
Right, right. And when you talk about, a sense of belonging, you talk about relationship and growth, opportunities to grow, right? But for an organization, when if they want to increase employee engagement, where should they begin?
Yeah. So one thing is I really believe in asking for feedback. So if I can build the coolest HR program, I can offer what I think is the most popular perk, but if it's not something that's actually driving value for our team, then I've just sort of checked the box and actually haven't impacted anything. So I'm a huge believer of getting feedback, whether that's through a culture survey, whether that's leaders doing skip levels, whether that's the manager one-on-ones, whether that's HR doing one-on-ones, or at Ordergroove, we also did some small focus groups. I guess it was about 6 months ago now, where we said, hey, these are some topics that we've heard about. We want to dig deeper. And so we did some focus groups that me and my team led. So I think really actually getting some examples from the team and feedback from the team, then looking across and seeing what those themes are, and then trying different things to address those themes. So, for example, a few years back, we really recognized that as we stayed remote, everybody had very different needs in what they were going through. And this was even past like the true peak of COVID here in the States, and really just focusing on, now that we are remote first, people need different things. And so we changed one of our benefits to be really much more inclusive of, it can be anything you need. So we now have a annual allowance for anything that helps you be successful as a human at Ordergroove. So that could be wellness initiatives, physical or mental. It could be professional development outside of like conferences and those sort of things, but books or coaches or those sort of things. And then it could also be work from home. So maybe you need an internet booster. Maybe you need a bigger monitor that's like outside of what we normally offer. So it could be for anything that you need, because we realized we are small enough. We're only 125 people, give or take. And so we want to meet people where they are. And so that was one piece of feedback that we heard that we wanted to address differently. And so we were trying to evolve with the team.
Right. And we often, almost all companies want to build positive culture in an organization, right? And there are different surveys, there are different reports. But then at the end of the day, you have to define and implement a set of company core values. So what are the pitfalls to avoid in building a positive culture in an organization?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up values, because I think it really goes back to that. So, one thing I really encourage people is, when we roll out new programs, or when we're trying something new, or when we're addressing feedback, or when we're going through good times and bad times, tying it back to those values to kind of show this is in our DNA. We're built for this. So, whether that was, when COVID first hit in the States and we all went home out of nowhere, and that was very uncomfortable for us, we talked about how one of our values is we're comfortable being uncomfortable. And so we are focused on your safety right now. We don't know how long we're going to stay home. We don't know what's happening, but we'll figure it out, and we will stay as communicative as possible, and we're in this together, and we'll figure it out. That's another one of our values, is we're in it to win it, and that's all about the team spirit. When it comes to relationship building. So now that we are remote first, we are getting a lot of feedback around, I feel very connected to my team. I miss those relationships, or I don't know how to build those relationships if I'm a new hire with people that I don't interact with every day, right? The people that I used to bump into the kitchen or would ride the elevator with. And so we talk about how what you see is what you get is one of our values. And so relationship building and authenticity is really important to us. So we're trying different ways to better connect people. We use Slack apps that randomly pair people for virtual coffees. We're trying different, as people feel safe, co-located regional events, or we're trying some different virtual events where people who have different hobbies come together and kind of like do that hobby together. So we're trying different ways to connect people, because relationship building is something that has continuously come back in those culture for surveys of, we could be doing better here outside of our direct team. So how can we support them in that? And so we'll try things, we'll tie it to our values, we'll try it to the feedback that we get. We'll try something, and then we'll ask for more feedback and say, like, did it actually make a difference? And if it did, awesome, let's double down. And if it didn't, okay, what do we need to adjust and try again?
Right. So Karen, when we talk about these, work at home and remote working culture, and though many organizations and HR leaders are doing several virtual activities to
Mhm.
engage the employees and all that, but there are some businesses that want employees to come back to office because
Mhm.
the FaceTime and collaboration, they feel that it can be a lot better, right? You can ship great products, and we have read it in the media how a lot of CEOs are driving that point home. So how can HR leaders drive this, come back to work, right? Return to work. How can you do that? How can they drive that?
I think it all comes back to the purpose of it. So, not that our team members are children and not that we're parents, but if you use that metaphor, if you tell a kid to do their homework because I said so, they're going to push back more. So if you tell your team you have to come back to the office, why? Well, just cuz, like, that's not impactful. That doesn't really resonate with folks. So helping them see the value of being together. So you just mentioned it, right? Perhaps you feel like collaboration is stronger. Maybe certain teams work better being together. You feel like you get to decisions quicker. You're building relationships more. All of the reasons to come back. But then you actually have to like find ways to validate that within the organization. So are you doing lunches maybe for people who are in the office, or are you actually having more in-person meetings and you're finding the value of that? If you do have people that are not co-located, how are you making them feel a part of it? So if you have people in different offices, how are you bringing those offices together? So just finding real purpose and then explaining that to the team of, this is why we think coming together every day, 2 days a week, 4 times a month, whatever you end up doing, is adding
Right.
value for our team.
Yeah, and the whole idea is that the businesses are able to continue to ship great products, and employees feel engaged, and they're able to do more, right? But
Yeah.
then there is a whole different view on that, and then HR leaders, as HR leaders, what quantitative data can indicate whether or not the employees are engaged or not? What
Yeah.
should they look at? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm glad you brought up sort of like some companies are doing and some companies aren't. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about, I can build a really cool HR program, but if it's not right for our team, it's not right for our team, which also ties back to the resignation conversation we had at the very beginning. This is what's right for our company. If that's not right for you, that's okay. You can go find a place that's staying fully remote, or whatever. I actually know a lot of people that wish we were in person, and so, hopefully they stay with us. But we've had people say, I want to be in person with a company. And so they've moved on. So there's lots of different reasons for that. But I think to your point around the data piece is, doing anonymous surveys, doing culture surveys, getting that concrete data and asking questions that get to the root cause of things, not that are sort of leading the witness. So I find I'm more productive when I'm in the office, and you can do like a rating from like 1 to 5 or whatever. Or I find value in being in person with people, and you can do a rating. So asking very specific questions to get to the feedback you're trying to get to without leading the witness. And then only asking questions that you're willing to make changes on. So for example, we're with a PEO, and so we really don't have a lot of control over our benefits. And while I think our benefits are great, I never ask benefit questions in any of my culture surveys because I can't do anything about it. Like, we're with Insperity, it's what the benefits are they give us. So I'm not going to ask about it because I can't do anything about it. So if your company has decided to be in the office, what my questions might be are, what what would help you be more productive in the office, or what's one thing you really value about being in the office, so that it doesn't bring up the question of you've got a choice. It's like, no, we're in the office, but we want to make sure it's the most valuable. So what can we do to make that more productive, more valuable, whatever, versus do you find that helpful? Well, if the answer is no, too bad. So
Right.
forming your questions in ways around things that you can actually impact and you can actually make a difference on.
Right. And we all know that, that, I mean, everybody wants to advance in their career. So, telling them what to do is not really the ideal way to go about it, like you mentioned earlier. And the other side of this is that, the HR and managers often fail to provide meaningful feedback. So, how can HR and managers provide meaningful feedback and help employees advance in their career?
Absolutely. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart when it comes to feedback, because you can't just check the box and say, well, I did it. I filled out the performance review. It's in the system. You actually have to have a really meaningful conversation. And it's actually one of the reasons why at Ordergroove we don't do ratings, because my whole HR career has been fighting about ratings versus what's the feedback you're trying to give. And you like back into the rating, but then you read the feedback and it doesn't support the rating. So it's really more about providing feedback that is, so outside of like any sort of scheduled performance reviews, feedback that is timely. So if you've held on to it too long, they can't make any adjustments, or they don't know what they're doing is good. So you want to make sure that you're constantly giving the feedback in a timely way so they can either adjust or recognize that something's going really well and like feel energized and motivated by that. You also want to make sure there's lots of examples. So if you didn't witness it, getting examples from others, because otherwise I don't have the context of it. So if you just say, oh, the presentation you did the other day wasn't so great. Okay, well, like, what wasn't great about it? You
Right.
didn't come to a conclusion. You didn't try to get feedback. You didn't get to a decision. You didn't talk about next steps. Like, what was the thing that didn't work? And then really helping understand, okay, great, now I have the feedback, now what? So that presentation on Tuesday with the team, I really don't think you solidified what next steps were coming out of it. So I think, next time, let's have a slide that specifically says next step, so that sort of cues us in the conversation. Or let's go back and send an email to that group about how we can, what the next steps are supposed to be. And so you can get, confirmation that everybody's on the same page. So help me understand as an employee what I should have done differently and how I can do it differently next time. And if it's a skill gap, how can I learn to do it? So let's review the deck next time and talk through those talking points to make sure you have that moment at the end of the meeting, or, just to kind of keep using the presentation example. So helping them understand what you expected and how they can improve in the future and what that action looks like coming out of this conversation.
Right, right. And when we talk about, creating an environment for honest and transparent feedback, and, employees are also able to receive it. And we have a, workforce, which is kind of millennial, baby boomers, Gen X, and all that, right? So if for a small business, right, how can they attract driven millennials, let's say?
Yeah, I think first is it all starts with trust. And I think that starts during the interview process. So, having steps that make sense in your interview process where they get to know different members of the team and they kind of get a sense of like what it's going to work, what it's going to be like to work with this organization, work with these different people, have a couple of different conversations with the hiring manager. So they're starting to build that trust. Have the hiring manager be part of the offer conversation because they can talk about why they're both so excited about them joining, but then also tie it back to things that are going to be important to this candidate for them to accept the offer. Like career pathing, for example. I'm so excited. You mentioned that you have this goal. I can really see how that's going to happen here, but it's coming from the hiring manager, because tying it back to everything we've talked about so far today, that relationship with the hiring manager is so key, and that all starts with trust. If folks know Five Dysfunctions of a Team, that book all talks about like how to have a successful team, and the bottom of the pyramid, where the foundation is all about trust. And so that starts through the interview process, then it continues with onboarding, and it continues with a relationship, whether that is building trust through understanding what's important to someone, creating safe space to have conversations about things, understanding different styles. If you're more introverted and I'm more extroverted, how do we need to adjust to have those communications? But it all starts with trust, and that a way to do that is to build that during the interview process so it's apparent from day one.
Right. And the whole idea is to create happier work culture, right? So if I can ask you, what does a happier working culture look like to you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really creating an environment where people feel supported and where they feel like they can make an impact and be successful. And that's defined differently for different people. And it actually kind of goes back to what we've been talking about around getting to know what's important to your team. And as a manager, getting to know what's important to that individual and how best they work. Because then if we're able to create an environment where I feel like I'm heard, I feel like I can be successful, I feel supported by both my manager and my company, then I feel like I can thrive. I can have a long career there. I'm driven and I feel like I know what success looks like. So I think really knowing what's important to them and building that trust and really giving them an opportunity to shine is really what's key. And so to me, that's how I define happiness at work. And like I said, that can look differently for different people, but I think those are the key ingredients.
Of course, yeah. I get what you're saying. So thank you, Karen. With that, we have come to the end of today's webinar. And once again, thank you everyone for joining Conversation with Karen Weeks. Until next time, have fun and create people magic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.